The techs at Hurston L4R&R can't fully repair my ship. I've decided I'll try to get the work done at Lorville. They've helped me before. It is good, however, that the techs here have been able to fabricate and reattach the left nacelle in the wing. That's going to be handy for descending through the atmosphere to Lorville. If the flight model actually took into account matters like center of gravity, thrusters, aerodynamics, and the like, I would absolutely need that left wing and left nacelle. Otherwise, I'd be unable to make re-entry or control my flight in any way. As my ship stands right now, I lack any thrusters on that left side. I have main thrusters 1 and 4, maneuver thrusters 10, 3, 2, and 8, and retro thruster 1. The ship should have no legitimate VTOL capability under a flight model that makes sense. All of the maneuver thrusters are on the right nacelle. The ship should simply flip over. This is part of why having no alternative to the pit hangars is something that needs some thought.
Initiated.
The only legitimate way I should be able to land would be by a rolling landing on the runway. But not to worry. This is Star Citizen Alpha 3.8.0. As I approach Hurston, I choose to survey the planet's surface a bit. Hurston is said to be an unmitigated ecological disaster. The atmosphere is laced with heavy concentrations of carbon dioxide and sulfur dioxide, and I'm told that millions of tons of industrial scrap, unrecovered leavings from past mining and survey operations over the past 50 years, litter the landscape. As I approach from orbit, notice how the terrain detail comes into resolution. You can see that major landmass geometry is not rendered accurately from orbit. These islands that I'm flying towards pop in rather suddenly and late rather than dithering in at a greater distance. This makes for a reduced sense of realism and makes navigation from visual recognition difficult. As I descend, several iterations of terrain detail are layered on, and smaller islands are streamed into my client for rendering at about 48,000 meters. Is that what's happening? Is it a technical issue related to how Star Citizen doesn't have load screens but does, as a result, suffer from level of detail pop? Here again, in the case of the two smaller islands just to the right of my vector indicator, they change geometry rather radically as I pass within 20,000 meters. Then again, as I descend to about 11,000 meters, the geometry of the islands changes again. Where there were 3 islands just to the right of my vector indicator, now there are 2. The nearer 2 islands have merged to become one long island. Another layer of detail streams in at about 2,000 meters altitude. Though terrain becomes more detailed as you approach it, the transitions are rather more abrupt than I'd like. Technical limitations aside, terrain level of detail pop like this has real implications for gameplay. Players will benefit from greater fidelity in what they see so that they can make decisions about such matters as landing zones and so on. It's easy to imagine a Hercules pilot, for example, looking to land a tank in a place that, as it becomes clear too late, is completely inappropriate. I've set up my destination as Lorville, so I have a navigational marker to fly to, and I take a moment to appreciate the terrain work in Planet Tech version 4. Hurston sports a number of biomes ranging from coasts to strip-mined regions to vast swaths of land littered by waste, to pristine savanna, among others. As I fly, I make a note of how fuel consumption changes depending upon altitude and velocity relative to terminal velocity. SIG seems to have incorporated, even at this early stage, some considerations that allow for choices that have gameplay results. Flying at low altitude at speeds close to terminal velocity or even in excess of terminal velocity results in increased fuel usage and a limit of range.
Proximity alert. Head. Proximity alert.
But it's possible to fly at a speed and altitude, say above 1,000 meters to 3,000 meters, that allows the Vanguard to have limitless endurance because it collects sufficient hydrogen from the atmosphere to sustain flight without draining the fuel tanks. The current flight model, as I said before, lacks consideration for how off-center thrust changes flight characteristics. With all of my thrust coming from main thrusters on the right nacelle, I would expect a requirement for heavy rudder input to maintain a straight and level flight profile, but this isn't needed for now. As I approach Lorville, I notice that life finds a way. Even within sight of Lorville, Hurston's hardy savanna trees are in evidence. The idea that Hurston Dynamis could destroy an entire planet in 50 years seems a bit of an exaggeration, and I see evidence that while they've trashed wide swaths of the planet, there's still plenty of life, especially compared to the many lifeless rocks in Stanton. I land, and I request the needed repairs. The techs here at Tisa Spaceport oblige. And I don't choose to see the fact that I can get this work done here when I could not get it done at Hurston L4R&R as a bug. Rather, I see it as a feature. Unintended feature, but feature nonetheless. I would expect that not all repairs would be possible at all locations. Perhaps they just don't have the equipment on hand, or they lack the capability. I would expect a greater chance of being able to get repairs at main hubs, while at lesser stations I would be expecting a greater chance that you can't get a fix. There could even be, perhaps especially in the case of places under strict control like Lorville, reputational factors that come into play. For example, I've done some work for Hurston, so they might be inclined to help. This is almost certainly not a factor in the current game engine, but I'll be pleasantly surprised if such factors come into play. The work done and my ship returned to full capability, I depart Lorville for Crusader and Grimhex. My work for Shubin has given me sufficient cash to purchase the Yeager quantum drive that I set out to buy. I note the time required to fly from Hurston to Crusader with the crossfield drive. 3 minutes and 5 seconds from the command to engage to quantum travel complete. I land without difficulty and make my way to the component store at Grimhex, purchasing the Yeager drive for 74,350 credits and putting in an order to have it installed. As of right now, there's no delay or physicalized work involved in this. When you make an adjustment in the ship loadout app in Mobiglass, the changes are made, and whenever you draw the ship at the terminal next time, the components and weapons will be as you've set them. This sort of mechanic raises some interesting gameplay questions. If I were to choose to change out, say, my main weapon, how does Grimhex have that new weapon on hand? And where does the old weapon go? There's a lot of magic baggery going on the way things stand at present, and I'd expect changes in the future. For example, when you upgrade a drive like I just did, will they offer trade-in value on old components? Will you have the option to have the component shipped to your hangar for a fee? Or can you have the old components boxed up and loaded on your ship as cargo within an SCU? Just things to think about. I depart Grimhex and make distance to consider my next move. I decide that my next objective is to raise the cash to purchase a pair of Avalanche coolers. 2 of these Grade A mil-spec coolers will cost 116,000 credits. I have a vague idea that I could just patrol the Yellow Belt, collecting on any random civilian defense force bounties that appear. But then I check again and I see that the Crusader authorities have put out warrants against the Ninetails and the Dusters, 2 organizations designated as criminal elements. I take up the offer of 12,000 credits to take action against the Ninetails and recover a mining area. The contract manager, a fellow named Bautista, advises me that the mission is hazardous, and I note that. I'll have to be careful, and I decide ahead of time that I'll not die nor be captured or lose my ship over this. Combat in the Yellow Belt is inherently hazardous, odds completely aside. The possibility of target fixation and collision at high velocity with a rock is high, even if light allows you to see the rocks. In darkness, the danger increases precipitously, because then it's entirely possible to not even know you're on a trajectory into a rock. As I approach the rendezvous site at space normal speed, these sorts of things come to mind. Thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoyed.